Somewhere, there is a version of you that learned to walk, that heard your own name for the first time and didn't know what it meant, that felt hunger before it had a word for hunger. That version of you existed. It laughed, cried, and experienced entire years of life. You have no memory of any of it. Not a blurry memory. Not a foggy one. None at all. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. It is not because those years didn't matter. Those first years shaped your personality, your attachment style, even the wiring of your brain, more than almost any other period of your life. You were building the foundation of who you are, in real time. And the moment it finished being built, the building itself forgot how it happened. So, where did it go? Is it hiding somewhere in there? Or is it actually gone? This gap has a name. Psychologists call it infantile amnesia. And it isn't a flaw or a disorder. It happens to every single human being who has ever lived. The average adult's earliest memory sits somewhere between 2 and 4 years old, and almost nothing reliable exists before that, no matter how hard you try to reach further back. Sigmund Freud was one of the first to seriously study this gap, over a century ago, and his explanation was, characteristically, dramatic. He proposed that early childhood memories were actively repressed, pushed down because they were tied to desires and conflicts, too disturbing for the conscious mind to hold on to. For decades, that idea shaped how people talked about early memory loss, treating it like something buried, rather than something that simply never got built in the first place. But here is where modern research completely reframes the question. It is not that the memories were hidden. It is that, for most of infancy, the brain wasn't yet physically capable of forming the kind of memory you'd recognize as a memory at all. To understand why, you have to understand what a memory actually requires. Specifically, the kind of memory that lets you consciously recall, I was at the park, it was sunny, I fell off the swing. That is called episodic memory, and it depends heavily on a small seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is responsible for taking a moment of experience and stitching it into a story your brain can retrieve later, complete with time, place, and sequence. Here is the problem. In infancy, the hippocampus is still under construction. Neuroscientist Nora Newcomb's research on early memory development found that the hippocampus continues developing well into early childhood, meaning the biological hardware needed to file experiences as retrievable episodic memories simply isn't finished yet during the years you are trying to remember. It is less like the memories were erased, and more like nobody was recording in the first place. Not because nothing was happening, but because the recording equipment hadn't finished being built. Does that mean nothing from infancy survives at all? Not quite. And this is where it gets stranger. Psychologist Carolyn Rovey Collier ran a series of studies using infants as young as 2 or 3 months old, teaching them that kicking their leg would make a mobile above their crib move. Weeks later, with no reminder, the babies who saw that same mobile again immediately started kicking, remembering the connection their conscious mind would never be able to recall in words. This is called implicit memory, memory of a skill or association, without a narrative attached to it. Your body and your instincts can hold on to infancy. Your storytelling mind cannot. Which raises an uncomfortable question: if babies can form some kind of memory, where exactly is the line? Why does episodic memory specifically fail to survive? Part of the answer involves something even more basic than the hippocampus. Language around age 2 to 3. Children begin acquiring the vocabulary needed to encode experiences as a structured narrative, a story with a beginning, middle, and end. Psychologist Catherine Nelson has argued that language itself functions almost like the filing system for autobiographical memory. Before a child has words for yesterday, before, or after, there is no scaffolding to hang an experience onto in a retrievable way. The experience happens fully and vividly in the moment, but without a linguistic structure to encode it into long-term narrative memory, it has nowhere stable to be filed. This explains something almost every parent notices. Ask a 4-year-old what they did yesterday, and they might struggle. Ask that same child again as a teenager about something that happened when they were 4, and there is a decent chance nothing survives at all, even though the 4-year-old could describe it in real time. The memory wasn't lost later. It may never have been consolidated into long-term storage to begin with, because the language-based architecture for autobiographical storytelling wasn't mature enough yet to hold it. Here is where the story gets even more interesting, though, because infantile amnesia isn't actually a hard wall. It is a fade, and the fade has a curve. Ask most adults for their earliest memory. and it typically involves something emotionally significant: a sibling being born, an injury, a move to a new house. Neuroscientist Patricia Bauer's research suggests that the earliest surviving memories tend to cluster around emotionally salient, novel events. Precisely the kind of experience that would have been unusual enough, even for an immature hippocampus, to partially encode. So why doesn't evolution just fix this? Wouldn't it be an advantage to remember everything from birth onward? Not necessarily. Consider what an infant's brain is actually doing during those first years. It isn't optimized for storing specific autobiographical episodes. It is optimized for something arguably more important: absorbing the general structure of the world at an almost unbelievable rate. Language, movement, facial recognition, emotional attachment. The basic physics of objects falling and disappearing behind other objects. All of that gets built during the exact years you can't consciously remember, and building all of that simultaneously may simply leave no computational room for filing detailed personal narratives at the same time. There is a cross-cultural wrinkle here that makes the whole picture even more interesting. Psychologist Chi Wang has spent years comparing earliest memories across different cultures and found something unexpected. Adults from cultures that emphasize independence and personal narrative, where parents frequently ask children to recount their day in detail, tend to report earlier and more elaborate first memories than adults from cultures that emphasize collective identity over individual storytelling. That is a striking finding because it suggests infantile amnesia isn't purely a fixed biological deadline stamped into every human brain identically. The hippocampus still has to mature, and language still has to arrive, but how much a culture rehearses personal narrative with a child, asking, "What did you do today? Tell me the whole story," appears to shape exactly how much of that early window gets successfully filed away for later retrieval. Memory, in other words, isn't just built. It is practiced into permanence, and some environments give children far more practice than others. This also reframes something that feels deeply personal as something almost architectural. You've probably had the experience of hearing a family story about yourself as a toddler so many times that you'd swear you remember it. The fall down the stairs, the trip to the beach, the moment you said your first sentence. Researchers have found that a significant portion of what people believe are their earliest memories are not actually memories of the event at all, but memories of having been told about the event repeatedly until the retelling itself became indistinguishable from a real recollection. Elizabeth Loftus's decades of research on memory reconstruction demonstrated just how easily a vivid, confident memory can be built almost entirely out of suggestion and repetition, rather than direct experience. Which means some of what you consider your earliest memory might not be a fossil of your own infant brain at all. It might be a photograph someone else took that you've since convinced yourself you were standing behind the camera for. None of this means your infancy is unknowable in every sense. It just means it is unknowable in the specific way you are used to knowing things, as a story you can narrate to yourself. The version of you that existed before roughly age 3 is preserved instead, in a completely different currency. The way you instinctively flinch at a raised voice, the specific tone of comfort that calms you without knowing why, the baseline sense of whether the world tends to be safe or unpredictable. Attachment researchers, building on the foundational work of psychologist Mary Ainsworth, have shown that the emotional patterns formed in that pre-memory window often persist into adult relationships, shaping how someone approaches trust and closeness decades later, long after any conscious record of the original experiences that built those patterns has vanished entirely. There is something worth sitting with in that trade-off. The years you have zero access to weren't wasted empty or blank. They were arguably the most productive learning period of your entire life, just recorded in a format: implicit memory, emotional patterning, motor skill, attachment style that your conscious mind was never built to read back as a story. Which means the people who raised you during those years are, in a very real sense, holding memories that belong to a version of you that no longer has access to them. Your earliest laugh, your first steps, your first fear, someone else remembers them in full color, while you carry only the invisible residue. The parts of your personality that were quietly shaped by experiences you'll never be able to consciously recall. There is a reason this particular kind of forgetting rarely feels tragic, even once you understand how total it really is. Grief usually attaches to loss you were aware of while it was happening. This is different. You can't mourn a version of yourself you never got to consciously meet in the first place. The toddler who first understood that objects still exist even when hidden behind a hand. The infant who first recognized their mother's face across a room. Never handed the adult version of you a diary. They just handed you the finished result, quietly, without ever announcing the transfer. So the next time someone tells you a story about something you did as a toddler, and it feels almost like they're describing a stranger, that reaction makes more sense than it seems. In a way, they are. That version of you built the hippocampus, the language, the emotional wiring that the current version of you is running on right now. And then, once the foundation was finished, the scaffolding came down, and the story of how it was built came down with it. You didn't lose those years. You simply outgrew the version of yourself that lived them, before that version ever learned how to leave a note behind.